Welcome to the Alia Graphic podcast. Today, we have a really exciting creator chat with a couple from Tunisia and Australia who have written a beautiful graphic novel together. I'm Iurgi, and I'm the convener for the Alia Graphic Novels and Comics group. This wonderful group of volunteers who love comics and libraries. But before we get started with our special guests, as a national group based across the land we call Australia, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. This was and always will be Aboriginal land. And me personally, I would like to acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation as the custodians of the land from where I'm speaking, where I live, where I work, and where I draw as well and write. And I pay respect to the elders past and present of all First Nations people across the land and thank them for the rich storytelling traditions and art. Now, Christian Carnouche was in our very first creator chat back in 2020 as the writer for the Resurrected, which I have right here, and which I absolutely love. And it's a graphic novel set in the future, think kind of Blade Runner, but set in Australia with an Indigenous Australian detective. Awesome story. Now, together with his wife, Meriam, he has published a more intimate and personal story. We'll talk about it, but first, hello, Christian and Meriam. How's everything in New York?
Thanks for having us again, or having me again.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were, I think we spoke in 2020 last, wasn't it? I think.
That's correct.
So, and I think we were living in Holland at the time. And I moved to France for a few years, and then we both moved to New York last year we're both working. It's great. We love it here.
Yeah.
You know, it was
took a bit of time to get used to it, but there's so much culture around. It's you can't not like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when was the last time that you've been in Australia?
Visiting was 2022 in May, but we used to go every year. Like, I moved from Sydney 15 years ago to The Hague, and we used to go sort of every year, and then COVID hit, and that put us off for a couple of years, and then we're supposed to go back again early this year, and then, we had a daughter, so we postponed that again, so it's all a bit up in the air at the moment. But yeah, since moving to New York, that's the biggest news we have is that we had our daughter. So
that's for another podcast.
Yeah, that's for
yes. And somehow you managed to make a comic in the meantime as well, which is awesome.
Well, thankfully, we did it before.
Yeah,
so we had more time on our hands.
Yeah. Well, we wrote it. We had finished the first how do I say, the first cut of the graphic novel, because when we pitched it to the publisher, we added an extra like 30 pages, which we had to do while we had a daughter. But so we're here, and I mean, it's great. Like like Miriam said, it took some time to sort of get used to it, so noisy, and let's be honest, it's dirty, and there's a lot of poverty, and it's very different moving from. Miriam was in The Hague, and I was in Lyon in France, and very peaceful, quiet cities with good medical care, healthcare. So it was a bit challenging, but then you just can't get bored here. There's so much to do. Like, it's just such a interesting place. And New
York,
you
have the elections.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
There's no time to get bored.
Feeling positive at the moment, but yeah. But I just wanted to say about the one thing that my thoughts on New York is that we were kind of worried about. We've heard that New York is very blunt and very rude, but they are so underrated. Like, they're really nice people, actually, in general.
Look, I never went to New York, but I lived 1 year in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and people there were absolutely lovely.
Yeah.
I had a great time. I studied year 11 there. Yeah. But anyway, let's start with Christian. You published the Resurrected. I'll show it again in 2020. Now you're actually 2019. You published it, 2019, and now you're publishing Tunis to Sydney. What have you been up to in the meantime? Did you publish something else in between? Did I miss something? Is my question.
Yeah, you did miss something, but these are my two biggest sort of books ever. But I'd say 2021, I published a collection of short sort of psychological horror stories called Murky Waters. So I wrote all the stories. One story we co-wrote together, House of Cracks, but I sort of worked with a bunch of artists, honestly incredible artists. It was, I mean, I collect comics and I read comics, and so I'm a fanboy, and being able to choose within reason, financial reason, I guess, but being able to choose who I wanted to work with on sort of 8 different stories was just a fantasy for me. So so I got to so I did that. That was self-published again. That went really well. I did it through Kickstarter. I didn't try to get it.
I think I backed that Kickstarter.
And then after that, I've done like 3 short comics with Renee Riantes, my Dutch friend, an artist, on 3 different anthologies. We sort of team up pretty regularly, and then working with Meriam on this book. And I finished my novel, my first literary novel, sort of about a philosophy student at Sydney University back in the 90s. It was sort of inspired by my own life. That's fiction though, and I've been pitching that, but so far, no bites. And I'm writing a second novel now based on the birth of my daughter, 8-9 months ago. So
excellent. You really like to go into lots of different genres.
I do. I talked to someone else about this recently, because I have ADHD, and like diagnosed, not like, oh my God, I have ADHD. Like I used to take medication and stuff, but I get really into things. I get very passionate about things, and then sometimes I can get really into them and then get out of them and get bored very easily. But there are a lot of things that I stick with, like philosophy and horror and sci-fi and Star Wars and skateboarding and stuff. But yeah, so I'm really into all these different things, and sometimes I don't know if that has a negative effect on my writing career, because I'm not really, like, I've written horror, sci-fi, now this is like a slice of life. I'm writing a philosophical novel, and I'm like, you usually see writers, they kind of, they're in one genre, and people know when they buy this book, this is what they're going to get. But with me, I don't know if I'm doing myself a disservice, but I write what I want to write, and that's it.
Well, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I think that's all you can do, right? You can't, like, I truly write for myself. I don't.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Now, we know Christian's origin story, because we also spoke to him years ago. But what about you, Meriam? What was your introduction to comics? And did you read comics as a kid, or what was your introduction?
General, I would say I'm more of a graphic novel reader than traditional American comics, or more like European style bande dessinée. Not exactly the type of sci-fi or superheroes, or those kind of comics don't really appeal to me.
My comics.
No, in general. And but what I'm more interested in is the medium and the possibility that it gives you, all the to tell, like for storytelling with images, and it's a little bit similar to film. And Christian warned me very early on. He said that comic book writers or readers don't like it when comics are compared to movies. But I see it as a very similar sort of medium.
When comic book fans aren't that keen when people come in and they write a comic because they want it to be a movie, like kind of using the medium.
Okay, that's what you meant.
Yeah, using
Right.
the medium to launch the film career.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have no career in sight, so yeah. So to me, this story, like, I don't know, we just thought, oh, it would be an interesting story to tell, and we don't have the ability to make a movie, so I don't have. So let's make it into a comic book story, into a graphic novel. That's about it.
Yeah, but look, I obviously, coming where I come from, yeah, yes, I did read some American comics, but my library, the European comic section is 3 times bigger than the American and manga put together. So, most of the comics that I read as I grew up were European comics, and I love all the Franco-Belgian bande dessinée as well, and Italian, and there's a lot of amazing stuff in Europe. And unfortunately, a lot of it hasn't been translated into English, but even though they're getting better, they're translating more things in the last few years, but there's still so much that hasn't been translated.
It's funny though, like with so I think in the States, like Tintin, Asterix and Obelix, I don't think it was that massive, or was it in England? There's one country, but in Australia, we grew up with like Tintin and Asterix and Obelix. Like I read everything when I was a kid, and it wasn't my friend's family or anything. It was just from my Australian upbringing. But then I thought it was in the States where it's not big, like, but in Australia, I don't know why, but it was massive, but not the other stuff.
In fact, with Asterix, so the English publisher is actually for a very long time has been from England, from the UK, and it's about a year or two ago, finally an American publisher picked it up, and they kind of Americanized it in a way, because they've done a new modern American translation. They've even changed some of the names and things like that, and they've Americanized some of the language. So it's been a little bit controversial with some fans who like the traditional English translation. So now we have 2 publishers: the English one and the American one. But I think that's why, because in the US it was never that big. So I think
we really followed the English, like we were very influenced by England when I was a kid, I guess. So interesting.
Coming back a little bit to what you were saying, when I was reading it, this looks to me like a very personal story, and I'm guessing it's partly based on real events or your lives and your feelings. Is that the case? And what prompted you to turn it into a graphic novel?
Actually, the events are not real, so it's all fiction. The only thing that's real is really that it's based on 2 characters that come from our countries. So that's the extent of it.
But it is so it is fiction. It is fiction, but it's inspired by, obviously our experiences. And we both lived, I think Meriam's lived away from home for like 20 years. I've been 15 years. And probably more so for Meriam, being from a completely different culture as well. She's Tunisian, but she lived in France for a long time, and then Holland, and now. So I guess the cultural differences were probably a bit more interesting than maybe for me. But I was going to say that the one thing that did happen was when Meriam first came to Australia. She came straight from work onto the plane, didn't know much about Australia and how hardcore we are, customs and quarantine. And she brought 2 oranges in a handbag on the plane, got off the plane, and then this dog came straight up to her and started sniffing. And, the quarantine guy pulled these oranges out, and he was very sort of stern with her and said, you could get fined $200 for this.
I'm going to let you off this time. But I had no idea. He didn't warn me, and
I didn't know she had oranges in a bag.
But I had forgotten about the oranges. But that was my first experience with Australia. So
that in in the book, without going into too much detail, there is a big scene where the olive tree gets confiscated at customs, and and a lot of people don't understand. I mean, in Australia, it actually is important, you know, that we don't let plants and sort of foreign into the foreign plants and stuff, not people, into the country. But look, some people don't understand why we're so strict. But we even talk about that in the comic. There's an argument between sort of the wife and the husband who are debating those issues. So that sort of inspired, and there are people like, we name a few characters after our friends and family, and there's like beaches in Sydney that are really important to us, like Clovelly, which is basically our favorite beach in Sydney, and Nielsen's Park and Queen's Beach. And then there's a cafe in Tunis called Saf Saf Cafe, which is where we go with Meriam, with Miriam's parents, and we always go there. And there's this poor camel chained up, animal rights, and not very big at this cafe, but and so scenes set there, and then some beaches in Tunis where some scenes are set. So it's kind of, it is inspired by things that people we know and where we've lived and what we've been through. But yeah, the story is definitely touching wood. We haven't lost our
But it does
parents.
stem from a real concern that I personally have, and you too, I suppose. But especially for myself, because my sister also lives overseas. She lives in the US as well. And my parents are my last link to the country, to my home country. So yes, it's a little, I think anyone in my situation or your situation maybe would understand the feeling. But yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I've been living in Australia since 2001, and
wow.
And this is always on my mind, you know. And my parents are still 75 and 77, so they're not too bad. They're still doing okay, but
quite young.
Yeah, but you know, but I lost my grandpa in 2010, and I had to drop everything here and go there, and I went by myself, and that felt very strange, you know, being there for that. And then of course my grandma is now 99. Yeah, she'll turn 100 in October, and
that's amazing.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's amazing because we've said goodbye to each other so many times, thinking this will be the last time. And she's still around, and we're going at the end of the year, and I know that I'm gonna see her, and I'm gonna give her a big hug, and you know, and it's for me, it's the most important reason to go. I have, you know, the rest of the family and my friends, but you know, being there for her, but reading your graphic novel, these are the kind of things that I often wonder about as well, you know, and things that I ponder in my head as well, so I could relate to a lot.
Yeah,
that's it. I mean, we have like our parents on 3 different continents, so it's not just like, oh, I'm overseas and she's overseas. Like, we're a very like, I'm half French, half Australian. So my dad's in France, my mum's in Australia, her parents are in Tunisia, you know, her sister's here, which is good, in DC. But so it's not even just, it's the logistics of just what happens, you know, like, we're not going to live here forever. We plan to sort of, you know, move back to Australia and live there for some time, maybe Tunisia, we don't know. But the logistics of, you know, parents getting older, wanting to be there for them is and not just our parents, but our, you know, our families and our friends, and you know, like, we're missing out on friends. I have close friends who had kids 15 years ago, and I barely know their kids, you know, like, and it's like you miss
and it's not just about your home country, it's also about your family. It's also about your links to your home country,
of course,
because the longer you live away, you kind of what do you say? You grow apart a little bit. It's like a relationship that you have, you know, with friends, but it's with your own country because you're something else now. So it's it's pretty, it's quite hard to explain to people who don't experience it, but people who do experience it, they actually would.
I think so, yeah.
It would speak to them.
Yes. Yeah, I can relate to all that. Now, what was it like collaborating in writing the story, writing together? Is this the first time that you're writing together?
Well,
hell. No.
Yeah, it is. Christian doesn't like writing with me, but
no, I'm quite joking.
We co-wrote a short story for his previous anthology.
Yeah.
House of Cracks, another story set in Tunisia. Yeah.
Another depressing story.
But with a happy ending, like this one. Yeah. But so we wrote House of Cracks. It was like a horror story. Again, this was Meriam's idea. So Tunis to Sydney was Meriam's concept. You know, I was the one that had been writing, so I kind of knew how to structure a story and the scenes and that sort of stuff. But it was her idea. Meriam was the creative director, you know, until Sam came along. So the artist Sam, and so we did House of Cracks. You know, it was about a woman who had lost, who had a miscarriage, and it was about her dealing with that miscarriage, and then sort of the house. She starts to imagine that the house is collapsing, and it's cracking, and it's falling around her, and you know the house is sort of her body.
Yeah.
But it has a positive ending, but it was a fantastic story. And we worked really well together, so we thought we'd do something else, and we were just thinking what to do, and then Meriam came up with this idea, and obviously, you know, my first graphic novel was like sci-fi. I call it very philosophical sci-fi and very like a lot of action, and then my next book was horror, psychological horror. So this is a big departure for me, but Meriam's more quiet. I mean, a quiet person in general compared to me, you know, very sensitive, and so we turned to I mean sensitive in a nice way, but yeah. So so this is like a slice of life sort of thing. So it was Meriam's call, and then I just sort of basically worked. I felt like I was supporting her to bring about this vision, and then Meriam doesn't really like when I say that because it's like I'm giving her all the credit, but it's not. Like we both worked hard, but I feel like it was your vision, and I just did my best to help bring that about. But we worked pretty well together, and we didn't sort of argue. But the only issues I suppose we had was that just timing, like to get it to sit down together, and we're both busy at work, and to sit down together and work through things. And I like to get stuff done, just bang, 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 like hyperactive.
I like to let things simmer, and I love to think about things for a long time.
For a long time. But in the end, it worked well because I was like, action, let's get this done. But then she'd be like, hey, easy. I'm not going to just go with that idea because you're in a rush, you know, like I want to make sure it's perfect. So I think we did find a nice balance between our styles. And that's just one thing. It's not the perfect, it wasn't the book exactly that I would write. It's probably not exactly the book that Meriam would write, but when there were disagreements, we kind of found that whoever is the most passionate about this idea, we sort of let them win that argument, I think. And so I won some, she won some. And in the end, we're really happy. We wouldn't change anything. I wouldn't change anything.
That's the nature of collaborating. Yeah, definitely. And it does have a very kind of a European graphic novel kind of style when I was reading it. So well done. Very much a slice of life kind of thing, you know, as well. So yeah, I really enjoy it. Now you self-published the Resurrected, and obviously that horror anthology as well. Now you're publishing this with FairSquare Graphics, a publisher that champions diversity and is an immigrant minority-owned publishing company, actually, as well, which is really interesting. What was it like working with them?
Yeah, great. I mean, I've done so much talking. Do you want to? No,
Yeah.
you sure? So yeah, we pitched to them. Fabrice Sapolsky, who's the CEO, and I don't know if you've read Spider-Man Noir. So he co-wrote that with David Hine, and that's blown up. Like they're gonna have I think a TV show about it now. And so he's like, I knew who he was before we pitched them, but we looked at their catalog and I mean, he has some stuff that's sort of action, and I mean, he doesn't really do superheroes or sort of horror or sci-fi, but there are a few sort of action stuff, but he has quite a few sensitive sort of stories that are more probably more in the European sort of taste. Not that Anglophones and stuff don't like sensitive stories, but it's just more, it's not Marvel and DC basically. And very indie, and he's got some great creators, you know, some pretty well-known artists and writers that work for them. So we were pretty impressed. And he's French, but he lives here. He lives in Queens. And yeah, he's pretty big on sort of from what he says, immigrant stories. And so this story is right up, because at the end of the day, it really is an immigrant story. You know, it's about a woman living overseas, and that's in a lot of ways we don't consider ourselves migrants, because I know people debate the expat versus migrant thing, but we work at international organizations, so we sort of move around for work, and we don't migrate to countries. We sort of work and then we move.
Yeah.
But we still understand the the feeling of moving to other countries. So yeah, we pitched it to him. To Fabrice. Was pretty cool. It was in New York, and I'd never had a proper pitch meeting before. And we went to a little French cafe, and we sort of pitched it to him, and we were sort of like, we knew he was interested because we pitched it online, and then he said, "Yeah, let's meet." But then, rather than going, "This is the perfect story, and I'm going to publish it," he was like, "You know, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you do that? Why don't you add these scenes? Why is it only 97 pages? Why isn't it 120 pages?" And so he really like he
really helped us make the story better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was very engaged in it, making it the best story it could be, you know, and it wasn't just, this is cool, let's publish it as it is. Like even the cover, I mean, we love the cover, but he suggested a new cover, which we think works better, even though they're both beautiful. So yeah, we feel like he really improved the book, and Fabrice does cons like constantly. He is just on the road constantly. And that's one thing, like the Resurrected, I actually had a publishing offer for the Resurrected, but someone who sort of I consider a mentor was just like, you know, what can this publisher do that you can't do for yourself? And so I just self-published it, and I'm glad I did. But with this book, like Fabrice has access to, firstly, he got it in diamond, so it's now in bookstores and comic stores like around the world. Today we did a signing at Kinokuniya in New York, which is huge for me as a geek, you know, as a comic book geek. But and he does cons all the time. He does all the library conventions, and so he's out there just pushing these books, and that's something we can't do. So yeah, I don't know if there's
it really helps when you have a really good editor behind you, and as you say, like, you know, they ask the questions, they point out the things that, you know, could work better, and they know the business, and they can do a lot of that work of promotion and all that as well, you know, and really put the title out there. I've already ordered the graphic novel for my library. So that's like, you know, it's something that you don't have to worry about. It's there already. It's available. Boom, I can order it, you know.
Did you order it from All Star Comics?
No. We use a specialized library supplier.
Okay, because because I was speaking to All Star Comics in Melbourne, and they said, "Oh yeah, we got some orders and a library ordered as well." And so I thought, "Oh, I wonder if that's Iurgi." But
yeah, it may be one of my colleagues from the committee, because I have mentioned that in the committee already. So yeah. That's cool. Now, comics take a very long time, and you're actually writing together. I know you've got a baby as well, and all that. But and you mentioned that you're already writing a novel as well. But is there another story kind of in the back of your mind as well that you'll be working on? Another comic?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are working on a story together. Christian pitched it to me. It's inspired by one of the short stories in his last anthology.
Okay.
And but his last anthology was more on the horror side. So we had to negotiate to find a happy middle because I don't do horror.
Yeah, Meriam doesn't like horror.
I do psychological drama, psychological horror, but horror not really my thing. So yeah, we're working on something set in the Tunisian desert, again, Tunisia. Hoping that American audiences and maybe Australian audiences as well will get acquainted with the country and the geography.
Yeah. That's Miriam's.
That's my goal. That's my end goal.
Yeah. She's always like, "Where are you from? Tunisia, huh? Where's that?
Yeah.
North Africa. Why aren't you
black?"
black?
People are very confused because you say Africa and you're not black, so you have to explain, and then you say, "Oh, Turkey? No, not Turkey. No." So it's
But this one is it is going to be horror, but it's more psychological horror, and there's and it's set in Sahara at a hotel, but and it's no, I was just going to say I've been told that's it, so I can't reveal any more details, but we're already working with it. We're working with the editor already, so yeah.
But it will sort of explore similar themes, not about grief at all, but more about identity again and belonging, and it's
racism in France.
Yeah, no, but we sort of, I don't know why, but we kind of tend to go into that direction very instinctively and very
we didn't plan
naturally. No, we didn't.
Like first it was just about this Tunisian French guy who wasn't really embracing his roots because he wanted to fit in France and be like a good Arab. But then it slowly started to get towards, and we didn't want it necessarily, it started to get towards about racism in France. But I've got an inkling that unconsciously with the elections that were just held, with RN, like how we thought that the far right was going to win the election. I mean, we were certain. So it was pretty scary. But like we're both French, like we both have French passports, and so we were both pretty worried. So maybe that's how we unconsciously sort of started going with that. So it's such a shame.
That sounds cool. That sounds like a really interesting thing, and don't reveal too much. But yeah, no, that sounds like an interesting idea. Definitely. Good stuff. Now, at the end, we always ask our guests to recommend 3 comics or graphic novels or manga or bande dessinée. It could be titles that influence you as a person or influenced this graphic novel, or just 3 that you read recently, whatever you want.
So, because our graphic novels kind of...
Oh, that's a really good one. I've already seen the cover. I love it. Yes.
But I was going to say, because ours is more of a European graphic novel, and sometimes I hate it because graphic novels are comics, and we know that, but I guess sometimes when we say graphic novel, when we're talking together, we mean more like a European style, collected edition, not necessarily like floppies, But I know there are people listening probably going like, man, comics are the same as graphic novels. Anyway, this is so these are all in French, but so Amy de Jong, who's Dutch, I think she's Dutch, yeah. So this is, what is it? Days of Sand, I guess.
Days of Sand.
I don't know what the English, it was Days of Sand. So this is absolutely amazing. Like
and the art is,
it's set in like the Dust Bowl of like Oklahoma or whatever, I think, around that area. And to see, it's hard to see, but
it's wonderful.
There are a few people that if I could choose to collaborate with any artist, and she would be one of them. And she's just incredible. And she wrote it and drew it. And it's just a beautiful story. There's not a huge amount of dialogue in it. I think reading this too, where we see so many silent panels, like silent pages and scenes. When I wrote The Resurrected, it was my first book, and I was so obsessed with, you know, everyone tells you, oh, you've only got a certain amount of real estate in comics. You got to make every panel count. Like it has to be moving. There's whatever. But she does like just pages and pages of silent scenes, and it's just beautiful, like just as a beat. And it sort of taught me a little bit that, you know, you don't have to action and you can.
And this is, I love this book. Do you know it? So this is the French title, but the English title is Swimming in Darkness.
Yep.
And it's, do you know it?
Yes. Yeah.
It's wonderful. I really, really love it. Loved it so much that we went to the same place because we...
So it's set in a spa.
It's set in this thermal bath in outside of Zurich, somewhere in Switzerland. And this architecture student who goes there, and he's fascinated by the building. There's something about the building that was designed by a famous Swiss architect, Peter Zumthor. Anyway, so this is like kind of a mystery, and you know, and it's all about the building and the architecture and everything, and it's absolutely wonderful.
So you actually went to the building. You went.
Yes.
We went to the spa. We went to the spa.
Oh, that's cool.
In the mountains.
Because it's a fabulous architectural what do you say, design. And it is actually, you feel like you are in the book.
That's incredible.
Yeah, they should pay him because he is fantastic advertiser.
And this is the last one. So they're all French. So Linko, the Inkle, I don't know what to say in English, the Inkle, and obviously Jodorowsky and Mobius, and it is one of the most insane. So Meriam bought it for me just before we left France. We moved over here for my birthday, I think, and I haven't finished it yet. I'm about like 4/5 through it, and it's a heavy read because it's an old school French book, and French isn't my first language. I mean, it was until I was like 5 years old. So and it's very old language and slang, and he creates his own words, and it's really but it's incredible. Like the art is just insane, and the imagination and the creativity. So I would even just as a student of comics, just to read this, and it's inspired so many artists and writers. So and just an honorary mention to I've got them over there, but Rat City, it's the new, it's a Spawn spin-off. First 4 issues are out, and my editor and good friend Erica Schultz is the writer, and it's basically Spawn cyberpunk, and that's a fantastic new series. So it's going really well. So
yeah, that's really cool. Moebius is actually my favorite comic book of all time. So yeah,
really, so you've read this, I'm guessing, then?
Of course. I read it when I was a teenager, and then I've read it again quite a few times. And I love his work. Everything he's like, even one of my all-time favorite comics, and I often say arguably my favorite series of all time is his Western, Blueberry.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, the Blueberry series for me is just amazing, and it's a Western made by French people, but it's just incredible. It's just such an incredibly good story. But I love everything he did, and his art is just incredible. But 3 really great choices, choices. So I encourage everyone to check out those books and read them if you haven't already.
They've all got.
Yes, they're all available.
They've all been translated into English, just to people know.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to that horror story in the desert or psychological drama.
Yes.
It makes it feel better to call it that. But, so Meriam thinks that the only horror is like gory horror. Is like, no, don't worry.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
and we'll stop recording here.